Dante, would you like to take it away?
Sure, absolutely. Appreciate it, Casey. I am Dante Mickens. I'm the chair of the board of directors for NOAA, and I am delighted this evening to bring to you an awesome interview and conversation with a gentleman that I got to know a little bit in Orlando, and also I've had conversations with his family as well since then. So definitely looking forward to this conversation, and hopefully, you will enjoy hearing his story as much as I have enjoyed learning about him over the years. So what we're doing here in celebration of Black History Month, we're inviting folks to share their story. And we have someone here to do just that. He's not just any person. He is a former professor, a former pastor, or maybe even a current pastor. We'll get clarity on that. And father, husband, and just an all-around really, really nice guy. He has went on to write a book, which we'll talk a little bit about with he and his daughter. But I just think that he has a lot to share with all of you and the remainder of our community with regards to his experience growing up, having albinism, growing up during a time when maybe it's not as easy as it has been for some of us. Not saying that it is completely stress-free, but I think he has some insights that will help give us perspective on some of the trials and tribulations that some of us continue to go through. So with that said, I'd like to introduce to you Mr. James Morehead. James, you want to say some introductory comments with regards to maybe start off maybe a little bit about where'd you grow up? Where'd you spend most of your childhood?
Okay, sounds good. Well, my name is James Morehead. I've carried many titles over the years. I've been an actor. I've been a playwright. I've been a poet. I have been and will be retiring from the ministry in the early fall of 2024. But let me begin from the beginning. I was born in 1946 in Monroe, Louisiana. I was the first of 8 children in my family. Let me be quick to say that I was born out of wedlock. My mother was a senior in college, majoring in home economics, and she fell in love with a man and gave that which was most precious to her. And as a result, back in those days, in 45, 46, and really up into the 50s, if you were pregnant and in college, you were asked to leave. And so she left college in her senior year and came back to Monroe, Louisiana in utter disgrace. And I suppose, though we never really talked about it, I suppose that it was not enough for her to have been disgraced by having a child out of wedlock, but to have a child who was an albino, I believe to a great extent for a number of years, increased her shame. I and my mother lived with my great uncle and aunt. They were the ones who had financed my mother's college education. And so I don't know what the conversation was like when she came home with tears in her eyes and a broken heart. So we lived with my great uncle and aunt. My great uncle had been an Army veteran. And to say at that particular time in the segregated South, he was well respected among Blacks as well as whites. He had quite a few properties. We lived in a large white brick house that was absolutely beautiful. Well, life took a horrible turn. But before I say that, let me say that I never heard the word albino until I started school. And then it came from a teacher, not from a student. But the first time I realized that I was different from the rest of the people in the family was I used to love to watch my great uncle shave. And there were times when he would put me up on a coat case and he would put white lather on my face and give me a popsicle stick. And I would pretend to shave along with him. Well, I looked at him in the mirror and I looked at myself, and he had this white stuff on his face. And I said to him, Pop Pop, was the name I called him. How come you and Mama and Ava Lee is what I called my mother? How come you all look so much different from me? And he said something that I've kept in my heart and will keep in my heart until the day I leave this earth. He said, you're special because God made you that way. And I never heard him say anything else about me other than the fact that he showed an undying love for me. But life took a horrible turn one Wednesday when he and my great aunt went fishing, and they never came back home, not alive anyway. A storm came up on a lake called Black Bayou, and they both drowned. He
Oh,
had a deformed right hand that he had lost during the war, World War One, and he had on these heavy waders. And as a result, those waders weighted him down, and he could not get out of them. They both drowned.
oh,
Well, my mother and I, our lives took a horrible turn after that, because the one thing that he had not done in the midst of all he had acquired was he had not prepared a will. And so he had a sister that came from Los Angeles, California, and she literally took over the house, put my mother and I in one room. And
wow.
for a few years, that is how we lived. Well, I started school in, in 1954, I believe it was. And I had never been out of my neighborhood up to that. I had never really interacted with very many people except those in my immediate neighborhood. And kids could be very, very mean.
Indeed.
And so here I was, so different color-wise from all the other kids on the campus. And remember, this was a segregated time. So there were no whites on campus. I was the
So you're
only,
going to stand out even more, right? You're going
oh
to
my,
contrast
like
even
a
more,
sore
right?
thumb.
Right.
And they laughed at me. We lived right across the street from the school. And so I took myself back home. My mother gave me a talk and sent me back to school. So I had to just kind of suck it up, take the abuse, and that began my educational experience. I sat in the back of the classroom because I had a visual problem and my mother could not afford to buy me glasses. Well, I learned to listen, and we had a book. And you stop me anytime because this thing can go on for hours.
No,
We
you're good. You're good.
we have to call out for pizza and keep going. But I sat in the back of the room. I didn't want to be seen by the rest of the kids. And if they had to see me, they had to turn around. And so I couldn't see the chalkboard, but I learned to listen. And
Right.
we had a book called On Cherry Street. And the teacher would have all of us to say what she had read in the book. And it went something like this: see Tom, see Betty, see Susan, see Flip, see Tom run, see Betty run, see Susan run. Well, I memorized it. And so when she came to me, she thought I could read, but I could not read the board because I couldn't see the
You
board.
couldn't see it.
It was
Right.
only when I got in the third grade, the books got more exhausted and I couldn't remember all of that stuff. So I had to learn to read. But I tell you, I would not for anything in the world, for all the tea in China, give up the experience that I've had. Because when I was in the fourth grade, my life took a wonderful turn. I was sitting outside of a barrack, an old army barrack that they had
Mhm.
converted into a classroom, had no heat, no air. And in Louisiana, we rarely got snow, so it was not a big deal during the winter. But I remember sitting out on those steps all alone, and I heard these teachers, three or four teachers came together to eat their lunch. And I remember one of the teachers saying to another, I feel so sorry for that little Morehead boy. By that time, my name had changed because my mother had married a man by the name of Alfred Morehead, and he supposedly adopted me. And so I went from James Otis Payne to James Otis Payne Morehead. And so I was sitting there, and the door was open so that they could get fresh air through. And I heard that one teacher say, I'm
You can
so
hear all of it, right?
concerned about that little Morehead boy. He doesn't have good vision. He's an albino. He is really sort of like a disgrace in the community. And I just don't think that he's going to graduate from elementary school. And I sat there, my friends, and tears welled up in my eyes. And I heard a voice. And that voice said to me, I created you and I don't create junk. And
Right.
I didn't know where that voice was. I didn't know where that voice came from at that time, but I later discovered who that was speaking to me. And that was a great change in my life. I did
Yeah.
not really come to a sense of who I really was until I got in high school. I had heard about God. I had gone to a Baptist church. And so I said one night, if you're the God that the preacher preaches about, and if you're so loving and so kind and so gentle and full of grace, I'm going to test you. I'm going to go to sleep tonight and I'm going to put these black shoes under my bed. And when I wake up tomorrow morning, I want to be as black as these shoes. I woke up, I took my hand from underneath the covers, and they had not changed. And I was heartbroken. And it was a long time before that heartache went away. And it was a long time before I could trust God. And it's so ironic that the very person who was ashamed to be around people, who was timid, etc., came out of his shell when he went to high school. I had a ninth grade speech teacher by the name of A.C. Freeman, who has passed on now. He talked me into being in a play. And that play changed my entire life because with my lack of color, I could play any role, give me makeup, a wig, costumes, and I
Right.
could become anyone. And I remember the first night that I was in a play, it was called Dracula by Tim Tiller. And I shall never forget, at the end of the play, A.C. Freeman introduced me as his new find. And when I came out on stage, I got a standing ovation. I got home that night. My mother was waiting up in the dark for me. She never saw me perform in a play, but she was waiting sitting on the sofa in the dark. And the first thing she said was, James, did the kids laugh at you tonight? Or did the people laugh at you tonight? And I said, yes, Mama, they did, but they had to pay for the privilege. That was the
I
beginning
love it. I
of
love it.
my having a sense of self-worth. And
I
it was
love it.
because of the theater that I was able to not only graduate from high school, but I went on to college, a segregated college called Grambling State College, about 33 miles from my hometown. I graduated from Grambling without ever owing any money for my education. And I had a teaching degree. The evening that I finished college, graduated, and my uncle brought me back to Monroe. And my mother and stepfather didn't stay because he didn't like crowds. And I gave my mother my degree and I said, this is for you. I thank you for putting up with me all these years. I thank you for not aborting me. And I thank you for having been there for me in times of need. And she started crying like a baby. And I
Yeah.
think part of that was because I got a degree that she was not able to get. Well, to make a long story short, I went on and started teaching in Oklahoma City where my wife was in
Actually,
grad.
before you go, can you give the audience a little bit of context as far as for the college you went to? What type of college? I mean, I'm familiar, but if you could describe kind of the demographic of the students and such, just to get a feel for what
Sure,
type of
like I
student
said, stop
population.
me anytime because
Yeah, no, you're good.
I went to college called Grambling State College. Grambling was an all-black school. But the beautiful thing about Grambling is that if you were black, even though you may not have looked black, if you had even 1/5 of black blood in you, you were considered black. And so there were quite a few mulattoes and octoroons, young men and young women who looked white. So for the first time in my life, I sort of blended in.
Mhm.
And it was a teacher's college for the most part. And I majored in secondary education. Grambling was good to me. The professors were good to me. They didn't pity me. They just felt like, here's a young man who's going to go places. And so as a result, I found myself doing well in college, not as well as I should have been, but I performed in plays my entire 4 years there. And it was being in the plays that gave me respect on campus. Does that help any?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it shows, you know, an avenue that you had that you took to the, to as far as you could, as far as, building your own confidence, right? And then also helping to, kind of instill that, or get rid of any kind of fear, that you might have of being in front of people. You talked about, how when you were younger, you preferred to sit in the back of the classroom. It's ironic that you were seeking the stage now, right? By the time, in high school and then on to college, you were seeking that stage. So that definitely resonates.
It 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 was beautiful for me. It lifted up my self-esteem. But I'll be honest with you, all of the experiences I've had, all of the tributes, awards, etc., that I received, I still, in my heart of hearts, dealt with the word albinism. I did not like to hear the word. Now, all of these things happened to me, and I was thankful for them, but I still felt like I was out there by myself because I never saw anyone in my hometown that looked like me. And it was not, and it may be surprising to you all, but it was not until 2 years ago when we came to the conference, the NOAA conference, and I saw so many beautiful people that looked like me, that there was just something that melted inside of my heart. And I felt truly like somebody. I had to come back and I preached that message to the church because one of the things I remember so vividly at Grambling, the motto there was, it's the school where everybody was somebody. And when I came to the NOAA conference, all of a sudden I felt a part of. And I will forever be thankful for that experience.
That is awesome. That is awesome. Something else that you mentioned kind of resonated with me personally. It was for you, I think it was your uncle, right? For me, it was my mom. She was putting on makeup one day in the bathroom, and I said, "Mom, why do you look like that and I look like this?"
Hmm.
And she said, yeah, as I'm pointing to her face in the mirror, she's like, "Because that's the way God wanted you to be." So not looking to preach to anyone, but definitely that grounding of faith, kind of instill something that nobody could shake. So I can
Absolutely.
definitely, kind of relate to that story.
Absolutely. Well, I graduated from Grambling State, moved to Oklahoma City. I was a teacher at a high school called Northwest Classen High School. It was one of the richest schools in the state, huge school. And I was the first African American to be hired in a full-time
Wow.
position at that school. And the majority of my students were white, not
Mhm.
black. I went out and recruited a few black students, but the majority of my students were white. I taught for 9 years and felt like it was time for me to further my education. And I went to the principal of the school and said, Dr. Dawkins, I want you to know that at the end of the semester, I'm going to resign from this school because I want to go to graduate school. He tried to talk me out of it, but I went ahead and enrolled in Oklahoma State University. First African American to graduate with a degree in theater from Oklahoma State University.
Wow.
Three and a
That's
half
amazing.
years I was there, and I never spent any money for my education. I performed in plays, built scenery for plays, helped to design lighting, etc. So I had gifts that I didn't even know I had that had brought me to the point where I am today. Never thought I would pastor a church, never in my wildest. I came to Anderson, Indiana in 1984 as an assistant professor in theater and speech. First African American to be in full-time position at that institution. And one of the things that the person who hired me told me later, he said, we knew that you were African American, but we did not know how fair-skinned you were. He didn't call me an albino. He
Hmm.
said, we didn't realize how fair-skinned you were. When my interview was over and they wanted me to come on as a professor,
Hmm.
the black men in the Church of God had been protesting because there were no black faculty members at this institution. And this was the Church of God school. And I remember so vividly when I got back to Oklahoma City, I got a call, and it was some of the brothers that had been a part of the experience because the president had called them and said, we love Mr. Morehead. We want
Hmm.
to hire him, but we want to know, and here, this is their exact expression,
Hmm.
is he black enough for you all?
Hmm.
Is he black enough for you all? And they said, he may not have black skin, but he's all black inside. So that has been a part of my experience. And when I think about Black History Month, I think about the fact of what our ancestors went through. And I think about how far God has brought me. And I have to tell people that I'm here because of the grace of God. And any gifts and talents that I've had have come from Almighty God. I have spoken before thousands of people. And here's a person who was ashamed to be in front of people. I've spoken at commencement exercises. I've spoken at churches, large churches, and revivals, and have always met with high favor. So I'm thankful for that. So I'll
Yeah, you
stop.
meant
Go ahead.
no, no, I appreciate that. And you mentioned, some of the trying, times in our country, particularly, late 60s, even into the early mid 70s, and still continuing to this day. Um, but can can you tell us a little bit, personally, did you ever experience, I would just call it racism, right? Or what was it like maybe when you might have seen some of your family members experience racism? What was that like for you? And can you tell us a little bit about those experiences?
I can't. This was an era in which segregation was a call of the day. And there was racism, yes, but there was a lot of ignorance too. And
Mhm.
so a lot of people didn't really know what I was. Whites thought I was white, blacks thought I was white. And so as a result, and I don't say this in a boastful way,
Mhm.
I think my lack of pigmentation became an advantage for me
Mhm.
because I I call myself the original redneck because in Louisiana, the heat was so devastating that I had to stay out of the sun. And if I got in the sun for any length of time, I would turn red, almost blood red. And so I was able to do things and go into places in Monroe where the average black person couldn't go. I would sometimes go downtown with my brothers and sisters, and they would stand across the street, and I would go into a little restaurant that sold cheap hot dogs and hamburgers, and I would buy hot dogs and hamburgers for them, and then I would go back across the street, walk in front of them until we got out of the shop of that store, and
Mhm.
out the side of that store at least,
Right.
and then we would share their food. So to be honest with you, and I'm not being boastful or anything,
Mhm.
I don't think I was segregated against as much as were my truly African American brothers and sisters and others in town.
Mhm.
And I have to say this: when I went to when I came to when I came to not Northwest, when I came to Anderson University and I started teaching, one of the first things that I would tell my students, because a lot of the students and faculty members thought that I was white, and I would tell my students at the beginning of every semester, I want you to know from the very beginning that my skin may not be dark, but I'm all African American. I wanted them to know that, but I still think that some of them could not look beyond my color.
Just what they saw, right?
That's
Right.
what they saw. Yeah.
Mm.
Not graduated, I retired from Anderson University as a full professor in speech and theater. And every semester, I would have the highest ratings of many of the professors in my discipline. And I thank God for that to this
That
very
is
day.
awesome. That is awesome. Kind of looking back on some of those accomplishments and so many firsts, right? That you were able to to secure and achieve. Is there any particular accomplishment that kind of sticks out to you? It can be anything. So if you had to kind of describe kind of your proudest accomplishment, what might that be?
I say it without reservation. I think my best accomplishment has been my wife and our two lovely daughters.
Mhm.
And I have to put God even ahead of my wife. But I married a godly woman, and I go back and I say this because it's, to me, it was strange. When I started dating her, and we would walk into a little area at Grambling called the Village. I met my wife in college. We were both in the same field, speech and theater. And
Okay.
we would be walking through the village, if you will, holding hands. And some of the men, young men in the resident hall where I live, would say to me, Morehead, how come you get such a beautiful woman as your girlfriend? And my expression was, because I'm special. She has been not just a wife, but she has been my confidant. She has been my chauffeur. She has been my counselor. She has a degree in marriage and family therapy. So I used to tell people I get therapy whether I want it or not. She was a Christian long before I became a Christian. And she used to pray for me at night, read scripture to me at night. And I would pretend I was asleep because I didn't want to hear it. Well, it's amazing that there are times when I'm preaching and I'll quote a passage of scripture and not know where it came from. So I would say that my wife and our two daughters have been my best friends and the best accomplishment that I ever could have.
Yeah, I too. It's funny, that I had not heard that story before, but um, you know, we definitely share quite a bit because my wife has a degree in counseling as well.
It's
So I
interesting.
too get all the sessions, whether I want them or not. So that's awesome. Um, talk a little bit about the book that you wrote with your daughter Andrea. What kind of inspired the book? There it is that you're holding up there, and I have my copy here as
Okay.
well that I got from the conference. What was it that inspired you to pursue authoring a book with your daughter?
Well, I started writing in longhand a book. It's the autobiography of my life. And I went to visit our daughter Andrea, and she, I guess I can say where she lives, but maybe I should. But at any rate, I went to visit her, and they have a lovely home, and there was a swimming pool, and there was a beautiful little sitting area. I guess you would call it. Uh, oh, I can't think of the word right now, but it was a part of the house, but it was screened in.
Lanai.
Hmm.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
Lanai. Yeah.
And I sat there one morning and just inspired. I was inspired by the beauty of the surroundings. And I had a tablet with me, and I started writing. And I finished a chapter that first day. And
Mhm.
I asked Andrea and my husband Archie and my wife and grandson if they would listen to this. And it was the beginning of my uh, biography or autobiography. And it began with, I have a story to tell.
Mhm.
It's an unusual story, to say the least. It is a story with ups and downs, heartaches and pains, joy and sorrows. And I'll stop there, but it was
Mhm.
enough to bring tears to their eyes. And we came back to Indiana, and Andrea called me one day and said, Dad, have you ever thought about writing a children's book?
Mhm.
And I said, no. And that was the beginning of it. I shared, she knew a lot of my life
Mhm.
and ups and downs, hills and valleys. And she put the book together with information from me. And because I was in the theater, it became known as the brightest star
Mhm.
because I stood out even on the stage
Right.
when I was at Grambling. And so that is what motivated the book. Now I'm still, I have to drop my head in shame in one regard. My life became so complicated with the church, etc., that I've not had a chance to finish my book. But we're planning to retire because my wife is the associate pastor of the church. We're
Mhm.
planning to retire within the next 6 or 7 months. And I'm hoping that I'll have time to finish the book before the Lord calls me home. So that was the motivation for The Brightest Star. And it has met with favor. Every place that we've spoken, every place where the book has been available. And I believe that it's on Amazon.
Yes, yes, I've verified myself as well that if folks are interested, is available on Amazon. You know, I actually saw an interview that you and your daughter gave, and though she helped put the book together, right? I just remember seeing her break down, even reading a passage from the book. Um, and this is something that she helped put together, right? But still, just how the impact that it had on her and continues to have, in pride, right? In looking at what you've accomplished despite all of that. But I if I can paraphrase, I think she was speaking something to the effect of, her heart still aches knowing that there are other kids, right, that also are going through what you went through. So if you want to touch on that a bit.
Yes, she's absolutely correct. I have a sister-in-law who is an elementary school teacher. And she called me one day and said, James, there's a little albino boy that I'd love to have you meet. We went over to the school. They got this young man out of class. He came into the conference room, and I think he was a bit intimidated by my size and my voice, but eventually he warmed up, and I could see the pride, I guess I can say, in his expression, because he saw someone like himself. Like myself, his mother could not afford to buy him glasses. That's a thing that I didn't mention. I didn't
Mhm.
get glasses until I got in ninth grade, and I had a English teacher, Mrs. Lena Smith, who realized that if we could just get him glasses, I think he'd do a lot better in school. And so she talked to the Monroe Lions Club, and they bought me my first pair of glasses. And it opened up a world to me. Well, this young man needed glasses, and his mother could not afford to buy him glasses. My wife and I bought him his first pair of glasses.
That's,
And
that's
that's
just awesome.
something that has motivated us. One of the things we want to do before we leave this world is that we want to start a nonprofit for other albinos who need some kind of support. If it's not physical support, if it's not emotional support, it's financial support. So There you have it.
Yeah. Yeah, very similar. In conversations that I have with really young kids, I'll often use the analogy of a highlighter. And again, this is just, I guess, my own take on it. And then I'll ask them, do they know what a highlighter is? And these are kids that are, maybe 5 or 6. And they'll say, yes, I know what a highlighter is. And then what I'll often say is, well, you know, albinism is God's way of highlighting the special people in life, right? So very similar, right, to your take on it. But it's just finding a positive way to have themselves, for them to see themselves, right? To see it in a positive light, not with all the stigma and the negativity. And I think that your book gives a very fair assessment of kind of the experience, right? It wasn't all, rainbows and unicorns, right? There was definitely challenges, but through that, it made you into the man that you are today, and from all looks of it, it was a positive experience overall for you.
Yes, it certainly was. One of the things that I found to be so encouraging is that there was a time when it used to bother me to have people look at me and my wife and wonder, what is he? Is she married to a white man, or just who is he? But I guess over the years, we've been here in this town for so many years now that I don't get those stares like we used to get. As a matter of fact, if there's anything, it's affirmation. And I discovered that as I have gotten older, that I have bad knees, and so I walk sometimes with a cane or a limp. And I remember I grew a beard, and it's white like this one. And I went
Mhm.
into a store, and a man much older than I am said, "Hold on there a minute, Pops. I'll open this door for you." And I thought, this man's older than I am, and he's calling me Pops. I came home and shaved my beard off. But I've learned to laugh at myself, at things I do, mistakes I make. And I realize that there are some things I can't do. I'm not mechanically inclined. I built scenery for plays, but I can barely use a hammer now. But I've learned to accept. And that's a part of who I am, is to accept who I am and thank God for having made me who I am. Because my journey has been a blessing for so many other people. And I hope it continues to be that way. There's a poem that I really love. It's called Mother to Son.
Mhm.
And it goes something like this. Well, son, I'll tell you, life for me ain't been no crystal stair. It's had holes in it and bricks and places on the floor where there's been no carpet. But I've gone on. I've climbed the landings. And I tell you, don't you stop now, because life gets hard for you. Because I'm not stopping. I'm going on. And life for me ain't been no crystal stair. No, life for me hasn't been a crystal stair, but life has been good.
Mhm.
And I have no regrets.
Thank you so, so, so much, James, and Dante as well, for helping facilitate this. Your story has touched so many, and we've recorded this, so it's going to touch even more people who weren't able to actually make it tonight I was going to say in person. We're not in person, but who weren't able to make it tonight live, should I say. Um, Really, really incredible to have you here to start off our series of Share Your Story. This was our first call for the Share Your Story series, and I can't think of a better way to have started it
That's
off. And
Bless
phenomenal.
your
we hope
heart.
to do more of these too. But we're always happy to have you back, James, too. We can always do a part 2.
Oh,
And we hope to
absolutely.
see you at the conference as well. We hope to see all of you at the conference.
Yes.
And if not at the conference, at least on another virtual call, right? Because that's easier to get to, I know. um, but yes, thank you so much for your time, James. Any final words for us?
I can simply say that I have enjoyed this. It has been a wonderful experience all day long. I was like a racehorse. I couldn't wait to get out
Oh.
the gate. So thank you so much for inviting us. And I thank my daughter Andrea for her encouragement, her continuous encouragement. So God
Yes,
bless
thank you,
Thank you,
Andrea,
Andrea.
as well. Andrea has helped too. And you have a lot of love in the chat right now. A lot of people are saying thank you. They love multiple people are saying that in the chat for you right now. So we really have enjoyed this so much. Thank you, James and Andrea and Dante.
Absolutely.
And we hope to see you all again soon. Check out the website.
James, we'll be in
for updates.
touch.
All right.
We'll be in
Thank
touch,
you.
James. Sounds good.
All right.
night.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great
Blessings.
Good night,
night.
everyone.
Uh-huh.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.